Mr. Chair.
All right, well, I'm acting chair, so I will act. Hey, I never got to do one of these, so this is cool. I love it. the little joys of life. Turn your hearing aids down. All right, sir, let us begin.
So you have your agenda right here. We
That's
do the
right.
invocation and the pledge.
Okay. Joe had asked somebody to do the invocation. Is that...
He asked me to do it.
Okay, then would you please do the invocation?
Our gracious Heavenly Father, we're calling on you this morning to say thank you. Thank you for your grace, your peace, and your mercy. We ask that you go with this board today, search their hearts and their minds as we deliberate for the things that's best for this country. As we make decisions, we hope that it's pleasant in your sight. We ask this in all things in your name. Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we can
I will
begin.
do roll call. Catherine D'Angelo.
Here.
Sid Blackwelder.
Here.
Carol Eichhoff.
Here.
Debbie Gasker. Wilbur James, absent. Lily Jean Johnson.
Here.
Marvin Keene.
Here.
Joe Lazara, absent. Rob Sheehan.
Here.
Bernard Silverman.
Here.
Ivory Wilson. We have a quorum.
Thank you. And have we had any medical update on Joe? Do we know if he's...
Not yet. We do have a card circulating. I will try to get down there and see him and send you all an email, let you know what's going on.
What about Chuck? Anybody heard from him? Is he doing okay?
I talked to him not too long ago, and he seems like he's doing pretty well. Still, getting involved, as it were,
On Saturday.
as we know him to be involved. So, doing okay.
And I did take a couple phone calls from Mickey. He's got an appointment in California that is going to cause him to miss the May meeting, but he is making an effort. He says he very much still wants to stay on the board, and he's making an effort to try to get to more meetings. So, at least confirmed, it resolved the question, at least in my own mind, of whether he even wanted to be on the board, but he does very much want to be. And feels that he has much to contribute. Well, I reinforced that the meetings are very different when he's not here, and that he brings value added by his presence. All right, sir. Do we have any visitors?
We don't have any visitors.
No visitors?
And no employee recognition today.
Nick has not arrived yet. No employee recognition?
I think we should recognize Doug just because he's here.
Just because he's here.
And he's doing a fabulous job.
He is doing a
We don't have any money for you though, Doug. But you're really doing a fabulous job.
Well, we can have the minutes show that he's the good-looking one on that side. Then we'll have to find something for Michelle as well.
I was gonna say that I'm
offended.
But you're always here though.
You're always good.
Doug's just gonna have to settle for all that job satisfaction that he has.
Right. Okay, do I have any comments or questions on the minutes?
Motion?
Move they be accepted as written.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that the minutes be accepted as written. Any questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Moving on. We've put 3 items on the consent agenda. I think 3/4 of us were here last week when we had committee meetings and these came up. And that's what prompted us to put them on the consent agenda. But we did have some discussion about if board members would feel uncomfortable if they were not at the earlier meeting seeing it on the consent agenda. So at any point in time, if you take a quick look at those, if you want to have them be pulled off the consent agenda for individual discussion, we'll be happy to do so. We have the revised travel policy. It's largely a matter of standardizing our expenses while traveling. revised budget approval, and then approval of credit card and vendor policy. No one would like them to be withdrawn. May I ask for a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Move we accept the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Yeah.
Opposed? All right. Service and PAC committee report. Billie Jean was not here, but you had excellent representation. Brian, or actually, no, it was Bernie.
Ernie?
Bernie was the service service king. I was gonna call him service queen, and then I thought that would be a little confusing. Well, Lily Jean usually has that
She's
for a lot
queen.
of
Yeah.
All right, sir.
We discussed, on the agenda, we discussed workforce development and policies and procedures. And I think the policy and procedure that was at the, that was ours was the, I don't even remember which one it was, honestly. But, was it the communications policy maybe?
Yeah, we started, that was part of PAC.
Okay.
We just had a general discussion about procedures. Most of the things that I would relate to service committee, that relate to policies are actually in programs. ADA program, I'm sorry? Title VI, things that are basically federal requirements that we have to have a plan in place in order to show compliance. The only other one really is service standards, and we didn't talk about service standards yet, but we will at some point. But that's something like, you know, if we had, say we had overloads on a particular route, there would be thresholds that would require us to put more service in place in order to handle overflows and overloads and things like that. So those are the kind of standards really that we're not necessarily ready for, you know, mostly because of funding more than anything else. But that's something that we'll just work on after we get through triennial and some other things. They're not critical at this point.
And there was just a few other things. Want me to go on with this? Want me to just finish up?
The burning list?
Yeah, and we talked about some scheduling things, and the transfer center, the restroom, and the ADA compliance there. And there's one thing that we talked about that maybe you don't remember, the contract with AECom. We're still working on that, and then we'll know after we sign the contract when we begin.
Yes, we have our first session for negotiations on Friday with them, and we want to expedite that process where we're getting them on board and getting them rolling. So as soon as that happens, we'll have an update on the phased implementation for bus stops.
So the phased implementation is not part of the contract, or it is? When they sign the contract?
It is. I mean, we're asking them to weigh in on sort of the path of least resistance to get them implemented. And we'll also set a date with them on when the first 10 need to be in place.
Okay, so that'll be part of it.
That'll be part of that contract.
The other discussion that we had about the signage, though, is that an enormous, what we think is a big job has not even yet been undertaken, which is to get all of the appropriate approvals when they are necessary, city approvals, town approvals, and whatnot for getting these signs up. And it's, I remember, at least, I guess we always remember our own words a little bit better than others, but I remember saying to Brian to not get himself into a trap of promising that these signs will be up more quickly. That is, in fact, realistic. That signage approval process, or the approval process, would take well into 2018, I should imagine. And so,
Well, it's actually even possibly longer than that to get them all out there. But the point was well taken, and you know we want to start doing a little better job on setting expectations. So.
well, I think we also want to have the rollout, if it can be done, occur in a fashion that our riders can understand it. They're not going to understand that there should be a sign in between two others, but we don't have the approval for that yet. So at some point, we're going to have to figure out how to do that in a linear sort of way, or how to do that in a way that is understandable to the users who we'll be shifting from a flagging down method to a fixed stop method.
Well, you would hope, or maybe assume that AECom, who's done this job before, has that.
Has some ideas about that.
Yeah, some expertise.
Yep.
Okay.
So we'll lay out a plan. I mean, I don't think there's gonna be any way to avoid sort of the growing pains associated with that.
Yeah.
And we will maintain the flagging down policy throughout this process until the process is complete. So, that's just something that we'll have to let our passengers know about, that they'll still be able to flag down. And we'll, the other part of that job is to give us a whole process for establishing bus stops, moving bus stops, and eliminating bus stops. So that, we'll have to, go into that sort of, on a phased basis.
I suspect that Michelle's, I was going to say Michelle's people, and then I thought, well, Michelle doesn't have people. It is Michelle. But that she's going to have to come up with a communication strategy that shows both the waving down and the fixed method, or the fixed stop, that we can then get onto some public broadcasting, we can get out some signage on, get some notices on the buses themselves. The same way that we did
And we'll
with-
be able to use the app. I mean, think about the app showing stops that are signed in one color and not signed in another color, things like that. So, we have that ability.
Well, we do, but I suspect the percentage of people using the apps is still less than 10% of our ridership. Is that about right, given the numbers that you've seen? So we're gonna probably need some signage on the buses
I think we'll
themselves.
see increasing in the use of the summer with visitors and with the ISOC students, international students. We're in the process of cleaning and planning, this is kind of go into public affairs, little vignettes. So it'd be
Yeah.
like how to use the bike rack, specifically thinking for the international students, but, and I am explaining the flag system. But trying to send them to the ABL, but it's not in the text codes. So those are planned in the next month to 2 months.
So that might be a template to use then
Exactly.
in
Once we have the
continuing
posts
to
in the
roll it out,
ground,
once you've got a couple of
then
poles in
we
the
can-
ground.
we can
Yeah.
do that.
I think if people are like me, which, some are, I guess, but
You are one of a kind.
I don't think so. But I think people would much rather be at a bus stop than standing in the street. I would be.
Yeah.
I am.
Yep.
Standing in the street is weird, and I'm an old guy. I mean, if I was a young woman, I wouldn't want to be standing on the corner, or standing in the road.
Not in this town.
Not any town.
Well, and even the rural areas,
Yeah,
those are even harder.
yeah.
So we'll need to get that, at least the development of that communication plan rolling out. Obviously, it's gonna have to roll out as soon as the signs start going up
Right.
as well. Do you know that, Wacom RTA is changing again? And first
Changing for the better.
well, first we had changed routes, then we had the ABL, we had the electronic communication. Now we've got fixed routes.
Changing again to serve you better.
Progressing.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Okay. Anything else from the service committee?
I have to sneeze again. We did, I think we talked briefly about what was going on with stop enunciation in the meeting as well.
Right.
And the package hasn't been delivered yet, but I know it's been shipped, and that is a set of 2 enunciation systems. So we'll have them on 2 buses to beta test them this week. And we're moving forward for implementation prior to summer service. So we'll hopefully have that up and running before triennial.
Well, it's nice to see that coming.
What is that, is that, what system is that?
These are speakers on the system that are tied to a tablet that uses the vehicle locating system to announce stops
Oh,
electronically. So leading up to whatever stop, it'll tell the passengers where we are, where the bus is at.
And that will relieve the drivers of having to.
It also brings us into compliance with an ADA requirement, which we're not in compliance with right now, because we're not announcing stops the way we should be.
Are we also out of compliance if we are not announcing them in Spanish? Our primary alternate language?
It's my understanding that that is not a requirement, but we can check on that.
That would be where somebody
What
wants
to
to.
do with the language of the United States is what?
Yeah,
English?
yeah.
We don't have one.
It's
We don't,
based on your geographic
Yeah.
location.
right.
Yeah.
That's what I was wondering, for our region, the dominant alternate language to English would be Spanish, I should imagine, but I don't know who governs
You want to
this
see the
side.
And
percentage?
technically seasonally we go to Russian and some of the other Asian languages.
That's true.
You want to see what the percentage of the Spanish languages go up to Little River and go into that new medical center up there and see the parking, the cars there. Because all the Mexicans go there.
Really? Yeah.
Well, because they had Spanish-speaking doctors and nurses.
Well, right around Coastal, before they put in the new tennis courts, every Saturday or Sunday, you would see 500-600 Latino
Yes.
folks with their kids playing soccer. This was huge. I don't know where they have moved to since those tennis courts.
Raceway.
I guess the bottom line is just us pointing out what our responsibilities are.
Yep.
Back to the signage, are we gonna see, what type of signage that they're gonna be put up, are they putting in the ground?
Yes.
Are they gonna show us?
Yeah, we'll show you a mock-up of it. I will do that next meeting. We'll have it for
At the May board meeting.
you. Yes,
And who did that? They're doing that?
we did it
We did it.
internally.
This is when we hope that Lynette will review the tape and write down all the things that we said we would do.
And we're buying them off a state contract with poles and signs,
The poles, the signs will be procured.
but we provide them
So that's just
direct.
when we need quotes for.
Okay. Okay, that's a.
It's a
provided-
small enough acquisition that we can just do quotes. We don't need to do a full-blown RFP.
So the cost we see for the contract will be for installations, permits and all that, but we
Right.
provide the pole
Yeah, that'll all be
and the
separate.
sign.
That'll be all
Okay.
separate.
So I realize you're playing mystery man about the color of the new buses. Is there a color issue, spoken as someone who is colorblind, is there a color issue on the signs themselves?
There are traffic manual limitations. There's colors you can't use.
Mhm.
But I don't really see us being in any violation. We're talking about basically a white background with a border and a bus symbol, bus stop, Coast RTA, coastrta.com.
You gonna have the bus on there with the color?
Just a international bus symbol.
Okay, I thought maybe we could see it.
So whatever colors.
Basic. We can worry about getting fancy with those in another time. I just want to get something basic
Yeah.
out there that's functional at this point.
We're not gonna go out and put the damn signs back up again in a year. It might be good for us to have the color scheme match what is the authority.
That will not be an issue.
It's
Okay,
gonna be all white.
yeah,
Wait on, wait.
right.
We can get a yellow brush anytime.
Any other comments from the service committee?
I don't think so.
Okay, then we move into the PAC meeting. Brian and I can do our best to try to cover that. Bernie already mentioned one discussion that we had about a communication policy. And it is something that either now or when you're ready to have it be next reviewed should come to a board discussion. Brian and Michelle will let you decide when you want that. It's basically when and where the board communicates with the media. And
Board and/or employees.
that's your board and employees. Are you prepared to talk about that now, or do you want to carry that?
Well, it's still a work in progress. We can, we sent out, I guess we didn't send it out, we just printed it. We'll send out the draft.
And we
so
had a
that folks
revised
can-
draft.
Yeah, and we did make some revisions in committee. And I'm hopeful that we'll have another conversation about it at the next PAC. And then we can bring something to the board.
Okay.
So, but we'll send it out to the full board so everybody can kind of take a look at it and you can weigh in on it via email or at the PAC meeting next month.
And I think, Mr. Wilson, you may be the only person, oh, and Lily Jean, we're not here for discussion. It had to do with, the media calls you up. What do? Do you answer their questions? Do you say, I'll get back to you? Do you do what you think is best and then call and let somebody know that that conversation has occurred? It's pretty clear what staff do, which is they will refer any media questions back to either Brian or Michelle as the Chief Information Officer, Public Information Officer. The question under which, what the board does, obviously the goal is to protect the board member from saying something wrong and to keep the administration apprised of what was said so that they're not overly surprised come WMDF. And then the contrary point is, what do you do if you are at a county council meeting where we'd like to go? And I think it's to our credit to have board members be present at the transportation subcommittee, in particular of the county council. What do you do if you get approached by the media at that point in time? And Bernie mentioned, you know, a media person coming up and saying, what are you going to do with the $1 million that has been in the draft county council budget for RTA? And is it okay for Bernie to say, we're going to buy buses? Because that's what Bernie knew, and that is what we're going to do. Or is it something that, you know, what are the issues created when somebody says, I'll get back to you? I mean, that's not sounding terribly responsive to media issues as well, media needs as well.
Well, now, that's great, isn't it?
We're going to find that $1 million to service our consumer, our riders' needs.
Well, I don't know about the revisions that we're done, and we'll see that when it gets emailed to us, but the one that we saw last week did say, and there's a couple of bullet points, no one is authorized to speak to the news media in a crisis without clearance from the public information officer and or general manager. So, and then I think we talked about, you know, that's in here somewhere that we would amend it to say, you know, if you do, then notify the general manager or
That was for standard communications, that was not for crisis. Crisis, I think we were still trying to hold it to.
Well, and we need to define what that is, and I mean, that's kind of where the conversation stopped, is we need to kind of figure that out. And the point was made by board members that, you know, we don't necessarily have control over what you do or say, and that's not the intent of the policy.
We will use words like strongly encourage.
Right,
as I call it.
we just want to know about it more than anything else, and then we also want to help you understand what the facts are, so that, you know, we're not getting misinformation put out there. So that's really the,
Message alignment.
yeah, I mean, that's really, yeah, having an aligned message, thank you, so that we're all sort of on the same page.
Because that's what we're concerned about.
And so really the important part of this is, you know, what is defined as a crisis.
Right. That's what I was gonna say.
And that type of thing.
You
So,
have to be
and that's still a work in progress.
You have to be very careful what you say to the media, because it doesn't always come out the way you talk to the person. And I have found that out. And that's why I will not talk to the media. And I won't, you know, I will say, well, you know, you have to contact your CEO or.
When I was working in Massachusetts, we were converting a railroad bridge across the Connecticut River into a bike path. And it's, you know, wide enough for a train, and I made sort of in passing that, you know, we could use it for emergency vehicles if we had to, because there's a lot of traffic on the road bridge. And that totally got in the paper, and it was in the headline. So, you know, it's,
I've been
even though it's,
I've been on that path.
yeah,
I
the
drove
one there on
there.
Route 9.
Yeah.
We had one here, we had a Myrtle Beach councilman that said something about funding the dogs and cats and whatever, and he said you can throw the cats into the Waccamaw River. Well, that went on
That's
for
still going
months.
on in the editorial pages.
Yeah.
But, you know, I know about saying the wrong thing, I've been brutally beaten for it, but I think there's also a problem of saying nothing. I think, you know,
That's when you refer them to staff.
Well,
If you don't feel comfortable saying something, and just refer to.
Well, I feel comfortable saying anything, but I don't know.
Even if you get brutally beaten
Well, I mean,
afterwards?
I didn't expect to be beaten up for it, you know, and I wouldn't say anything that I expect to be beaten up for.
Look, you know, everything and anything is overcomable. We just want to set some guidelines
Yeah.
to help you all.
Good, I'm good.
So that's
I
kind
wanna
of the
see-
intent of the policy.
The definition of a crisis is gonna be awkward, because if a crisis is extended, for example, to personnel issues, then I can see a problem if the board chair is asked directly to speak on something as a board chair, and the question is a personnel issue. Probably the last thing I'm gonna do is say, well, then you have to talk to that person, if it is the GM, or the public information officer. What I would prefer to do is to say they have our complete faith and support. So I think there are gonna be times where the board chair is gonna be approached in that role of board chair as opposed to board member and asked to speak. And I could envision a time where that conversation is gonna have to occur. Or I could envision a scenario under which that conversation is gonna have to occur.
And it's a fair conversation, because if you're board chair, or when you're board chair, you're the head of this agency.
That's exactly right. And so when the revisions come out, I think we're gonna look carefully at that definition of a crisis and also at the role that we play. So the fact that we're going around on about it even now, as we did last week, means that this is not gonna be an easy policy to craft.
Right. And we have time.
Yep.
Get it to where we want it.
Okay.
Even though we know freedom of speech is a right, and I don't believe in stifling anybody's speech, but when it comes to an organization like this, I think we should have designated speakers
Right.
for the public.
And frankly, I would prefer to see a board chair be a potential designated speaker as the GM and as the public information officer. I don't see any way you can, any other way you can ensure that the board views get expressed at that point. But especially, the only one I can think of, frankly, is a personnel issue, that somebody would want to speak specifically to a board chair. Now, if somebody wants to speak to you, Lily Jean, as representative of Georgetown, and they say, what does Georgetown think about bus service down there? Is that something that you would then delegate back to the GM? Or would you feel that you need to speak to that?
I would speak as Lily Jean Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, but some of you have multiple hats. I mean, that hat is your hat as a council member.
Yep.
So, you know, that we wouldn't want to have any control over. So, and that, you know,
But by
A
saying
lot of it
that,
is
though,
case
you're
by
not
case.
speaking for any organization, you're speaking for yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going to attach
Yeah.
my identity of council,
Right.
but I'm speaking for me.
yeah.
For me, the big media aha in my life occurred when I realized that the person who writes a story in the newspaper is not the person who titles
Oh,
the
God.
story.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
right.
have stepped into it more than once, taking a reporter to great task for a truly inappropriate headline, only to discover that the reporter never wrote the headline. That was
Nor are they the ones to edit it, so it can be appropriately
different.
attributed, and then things could have been edited
Yeah.
out to make the whole meaning of the article change.
And you must remember that these articles are put in the paper for people to want to read them.
Yeah, they're there to sell papers.
Right.
Yes. So, we welcome Nick. We will put you in the minutes as having been here. Anything else on PAC? The one thing on PAC that I would simply add, we had a discussion item about it. I see service and PAC overlapping quite a bit in both the people who are speaking, but also the topics. And I am going to suggest a potential bylaw change. I will wait until I'm chair in June, that we would combine service and PAC committees into a single meeting or into a single committee.
The bylaws committee will be working on that. I'd like to see the committee for a few minutes after this meeting so that I can just discuss that.
Related to that is how, the composition of that new combined
Right.
committee, how many, and then take reps from the two
Right.
previous
Because
committees.
now there would be 8 on the two committees
Yeah,
together,
yeah,
and you wouldn't
yeah.
want,
Yeah, you probably don't want that.
and you don't want 8, so
For one thing, it's a
what
quorum.
what I'm concerned about, if we only have 3 or 4 on that, what about the other 4 people that usually come? Are they gonna stay home and not know what's going on?
Yeah. Well,
You know, that's
anyone's
one
always
thing to
welcome
think
to any
about.
meeting.
I know, but a lot of people, if you don't have to be there, they're not gonna be there.
Right. I put a little bit of thought into this, and I think it makes some sense to combine them, the two committees, and maybe set it up with 5 members, that way you stay below the quorum. Even though we treat them as quorum meetings, right? We advertise them, they're open to the public, and for the very fact that usually there's more than a quorum
Right,
here at the
right.
meetings. But I think a 5-member committee makes some sense, because there's quite a few topics that, you know,
Well, I feel that,
combining those two.
I feel that if you don't attend the different committee meetings and the finance meeting, as a board member, you really don't know what's going on.
Or you have to play a lot of catch-up at the full committee.
But you don't, but a lot of that stuff isn't discussed at the board meeting.
A question, like last week, we had finance, PAC, and service all back to back to back.
Right.
So there's a bunch of us here that day.
Yeah, 3 hours.
But if you're not a member of the committee, but you're in the room, did we get any complication with the quorum of the board?
No, it's
Illuminati's
all publicly
announced.
announced,
Yeah.
so we have no issues with that, and we'll keep it that way,
Good.
so that, you know, we don't have any
A lot of
problems
us,
with having a quorum.
I came to every finance committee before I was on the committee, because I'm interested in a lot of stuff goes on. I thought it was very convenient to have all those 3 on that same day. quite
Yeah, it's a little
frankly.
tough on staff, but if we're cutting it down to 2,
Yeah.
you know, with service / PAC and finance, then that's something we can continue doing.
The other standing committee question that I have is the standing committee that has not met, which is the
Fund
funding,
development.
fund development standing committee. I guess one thing to do is just leave it there and have it not meet, or it could be recharged, or we could remove it from the standing committees from the bylaws.
Well, it got put on the back burner simply because of the conversations going on with the county, so, I think it's one that we need, eventually. So I'd like to keep it if we can.
You know, we didn't always announce every meeting. We announced board meetings and, but not committee meetings, and we began doing that thanks to Dr. Twiggs pushing that over and over for some months maybe, or I don't know how long, but that's when we started announcing every meeting.
Okay. And
Yep.
to my memory, I don't have other things that we discussed of substance in the past.
No, we spent a lot of time on that, policy.
Okay. All right.
So, I guess it was, you know, sort of following on with PAC, I mean, the other things that were going on, I did have these in the GM report, but we presented to Surfside City Council last night. You know, it was a very short presentation, just talked about some of our accomplishments in the last 2 years, and we will be at their budget workshop meeting tomorrow morning, and I'm hopeful to at least get a line item in their budget. Doesn't really, it's not too important what the amount is, but I'd like to see if we can't get something out of them from their support. But they a lot of nodding heads and, you know, happy that I was there, and I got to do my presentation before they went off on each other about beach tents.
And engineering contract.
And engineering contracts. We meet with Conway City Council on Monday. I'm enthusiastic about that conversation, optimistic. So we start getting them back on our funding dole, as it were. You know, the mayor's a big supporter, and I appreciate Michelle covering for me. I had a baseball game that night that I was head coaching, so I couldn't go to the meeting. But the letter that we sent, which I sent to you all, was well received, and I'm just going to go kind of give them more details about, you know, some of those accomplishments, and talk to them about what we'd use some funding, and the ask has been for $50,000 from them, so hopefully we'll get some some subset of that or all of it.
What time is that Monday?
It's 5:30
You want any-
PM.
You want any of us with you?
Well, certainly, hoping, Mr. Wilson can be there.
Yeah, that's gonna be next week,
Monday night, 5:30.
this Monday?
Yes, sir, this coming Monday.
But yes, certainly anybody else attending, would be great.
We did have also discussion, I think it was in Service or PAC, about the workforce development project that might bring transportation to Loris.
Loris and
In
Bucksport. Yep. Still working on the grant. Grant's due May 15th. It's a $100,000 grant. They're awarding 6 $100,000 grants statewide, so we've got, some competition there. But it's really a way of artificially expanding our system. The big trick will be sustainability for that project in future years.
Well, you shared that it's gonna be a $100,000 grant that is gonna require $150,000.
Yeah, well, and they want
To
18
service.
months. They want 18 months, so it's actually a little bit more than that. Somewhere in that range. So we gotta make sure it fits in the budget, but I think it will. I mean, we have 152,000 at the end of the budget right now. And I think it's money well spent for, not a ton of service, but making some connections in the rural area that we need to make. And, this did get, sort of all started with Congressman Rice, so, even though he's not a huge transit opponent, maybe this is something to kind of get some support from him, long
And
range.
who's gonna decide, the state, who's gonna decide this one?
Oh, yeah, Workforce Development, Department of State.
We had discussion, can the 100,000 be less, can they split that into
It's
quantity?
up to $100,000,
Now, we
but only
need-
6 will be awarded across the state regardless of the amount.
We can't really participate if it's less than 100, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so, some of the applications that we're going up against might say, we might be able to do something different for less money, and I will make sure that we don't say that in ours. It's kind of it's gotta be kind of a all or nothing type of thing to get 18 months worth of service.
And what are your intentions regarding North Myrtle? You've got to get
Well-
some.
Well, I spoke with Kitty before the meeting, and we need to get out there and continue the discussion. The issue with North Myrtle, as I mentioned to her, is that it's a scale issue. If we're really gonna do it right in North Myrtle Beach, we're talking about a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 proposition, connecting it to Myrtle Beach service, and I just kind of see that that's really more of something that we look at when we have dedicated funding. I'm not sure what the timeline is on that, but the point I got from her email last week was we need to get out there and continue the conversations.
Well,
And that's a point that's well taken.
at a minimum, Myrtle Beach may want something much less scaled down on the recognition that they think they're already funding something through county taxes. So at least we've got to have a presence there with the mayor and with their council.
And we'll get out there. We also want to talk to the chamber, so we feel like they're a proponent as well. So we will make those meetings happen here in short order.
The big problem there, without a fixed route, we can have, we're not able to have paratransit. And that's important up there. We got a big hospital up there.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying. That's
I
more
know,
cost.
I know.
So, when I say 400,000, 500,000, 600,000, I mean, that's what you're talking about.
But
At a minimum.
Evidently, we're not talking to the right person. I don't know.
So how far north would that service go? Would it go up the Little River that far?
Well, I mean, it hasn't been designed yet. I mean, if you remember in our vision plan, the network, we had commuter buses coming in from Little River and coming through North Myrtle Beach all the way down into Myrtle Beach. We did have service from Loris down Route 9 into North Myrtle Beach. And then we had some sort of circulator route in Myrtle Beach, North Myrtle Beach. And where that would go, I couldn't venture a guess.
Yeah, I would-
Certainly something between Barefoot and downtown.
even if we got on Morley's back, and I know you said he's interested in policing up there, in Little River, there's a big police problem up there. But he's got the hospital up there, you know, that's his area that he covers, and he covers North Myrtle Beach.
And who's the he you're referring to?
Harold Worley, the
Okay.
county councilman.
And because from time to time, he's been with us. There's been times he hasn't been with us, but many times. But these are his people he represents.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean.
He's got too big, he's got that medical, that, I'm telling you, that medical association.
Little River Medical.
Yeah, and I think the people that go there, I don't think that they're not people with insurance. And I think if the state or the federal government, somebody picks up the cost of all that. Because I think they were given $3 to $5 million to build that.
I think they're federal qualified health, they're an FQHC, so that's where the funding comes for that.
Right. But, you know, but that place is loaded with people every day.
You know, past general managers have gotten sideways on this issue, but we have a real equity concern when we talk about spreading service into these areas. You know, we have been utilizing federal dollars that come to us by virtue of the population in North Myrtle Beach. And, you know, if we were to ever try to utilize those dollars in North Myrtle Beach, that means I gotta get more local funding from another source in order to continue our existing service. So that's why, you know, having a vehicle registration fee or something that everybody's contributing to helps with that equity issue.
Well, we're already
And-
contributing $50 for each car, aren't we? For the roads, for motor vehicle.
Yeah, well, that's user fee, and I'm
Yeah.
talking about something
But
different, but.
what about, now you have, Little River, what about just, you know, thinking about service in Little River, forget about North Myrtle Beach. Come, you know, like you had mentioned before, come down from Mars and go there. At least you hit the two the hospitals and the big medical center. And the county should pay for that. We're part of the county there. We have to worry about North Myrtle Beach and they don't wanna pay for this because they pay county taxes and,
Right.
you know.
Well, in our discussions with the county, we put that map out there. I mean, the problem is trying to run that by itself is not gonna be as effective if it's not part of, as opposed to being part of a network. You know, you can't run just Route 9 and expect it to, I mean, it'll carry some people, obviously, but it needs to be connected at North Myrtle Beach, and North Myrtle
Right,
Beach needs
right.
to be connected at Myrtle Beach, and so trying to focus service on a point further away doesn't really help us as much as you'd think.
Right.
You know, now that, you know, the commuter service coming from Loris is a possibility, and running it through
That's right.
North Myrtle Beach, because you don't have to do the paratransit side of it. Because it's, you know, you run it as an express service, and you don't have the paratransit requirement associated with.
Right, if you came from
and-
Mars, you would hit 9 and then would come down 9 and you would hit the hospital there.
Right. So, you know, there are other lower intensity options, but they, you know, we run the risk of them, you know, they need to be successful. If we're gonna take that route, they gotta really produce,
Right.
or we're setting ourselves up for failure long term.
Well, I don't think we want to set ourselves up for failure, but at the same token, Brian, I think you have a much more far-reaching, strategic thinking process going on in your mind, which is not going to be successful if we don't at least reach out to those folks
Right.
and get them onto the same strategic wavelength that you are. So we've got to get the mayor, we've got to get the council, we've got to get the chamber at least in conversation with us so that they understand why we're doing what we're doing as it is. So that's kind of the bottom.
As we explore expanding to new routes, and also with the fixed resources, that limits our ability to expand frequency of service to the existing routes, right?
Yep.
And that's the trade-off there. Do you provide more frequent service to, say, Conway at the expense of going to Loris? And there is a trade-off. We need to do both, but when you only have so many dollars, which one do we pick?
Right.
Now, as the chair is saying, we need more resources.
That's a debate every transit system goes through. Do we do coverage or we do frequency? And, we always run we run up against that brick wall of, well, what about ridership? The coverage services don't produce the ridership, but they create connections, really important connections. If you want ridership, then you gotta do entertainment shuttle-like projects, short trips, lots of people, lots of activity, those types of things. And transit, that's where transit's biggest bang for its buck is. We just gotta find a balance. And, we talked about in our visioning that, that network is really kind of our baseline. And then when we build, we have maybe 40% of it in place. We gotta put all these other connections, these other rural connections in. Then we start building on frequencies where we really are moving people.
The other discussion that we had, Brian just mentioned the entertainment shuttle. We're going into summer 2017, and it's become clear to management that there will be no more money from chamber
It's,
for
unlikely.
entertainment.
There never was.
There'll be no money.
but we still have some conversations with the hotels coming up, but.
Hotels or
With-
restaurants, we did
With
discuss
the
that.
hospitality industry.
Yeah.
So that's $250,000, as I recall. Isn't that about what it costs to run that? Yeah.
50.
So that is a.
But I think it's money well spent because of the ridership it generates. But
Well, and it also sets the chamber up as being that everyone thinks the chamber's doing it. If they're not.
Well,
Well, is there any way, and I ask this to Michelle maybe, or somebody, anybody, or Deb, or Darrell, we're delegates of we're representatives of the delegation. So is there any way that, we can meet with delegation people? I know they don't pull the strings in North Myrtle Beach, but they're certainly on the scene. They must have lots of contact with the mayor, the council of North Myrtle Beach. Do you think that would be an effective approach? Is there anything we can do on that side?
And Al, when is Marilyn's term up? And I understand she's not running again. Is that
That's what I've heard too. She's not running?
No, not again. She told me last time she would. She told me a couple years ago she had.
I just saw something very recently, where she's running.
So she changed her mind. I heard that in the winter she was not.
Right, and I just saw something really recently.
No, could be.
Can we return to Bernie's comment
Anyway.
about the delegation? or-
Well, and I was gonna say, this might be something more for the committee meeting and how we would approach it and come up with a plan. And then that way we would have something internally for staff as well as any board members who want to approach someone up in the North Myrtle Beach area or the delegation. I think it's something that we need to talk about and have a plan.
we need to try to get on Mark's, the North Myrtle Beach Chambers, and talk to them before the committee meeting, so we get a little bit of the lay of the land up there and then check. And if we get an audience with the mayor, that'd be good.
So, there's so many things going on that we have to be aware, and that's where I think you need planning and getting on calendars. So
Right.
it's just something, let's take that offline and come up back with it.
So I'd hate to go to them and have us be just such a minor detail.
Right,
They
right.
push up the side.
I think if we come up with talking points and have a plan, we'll be better served. So let's just kind of have that as an offline conversation.
The board anxiety is just simply that this cannot fall through the cracks. The problem with an agency or an authority that is trying to do as much as we're trying to do is it's easy to have things fall through the cracks because there's always something new and different to talk about or something that needs fixing. And we just need a commitment from management that this will not in fact fall through the cracks and that there will be some communication to the various constituencies in North Myrtle that they know, we know.
I feel that in the past, I can't tell you how many times I've been up there and we've talked to Marilyn and we've talked to the administrator and the one before him. I feel that the best thing for us to do is to talk before the entire council and then you'll get a true feeling of what's going on. Not that this one doesn't think it's a priority, and not that this one doesn't. I think the whole council should be talked to.
Is it something you can agree
Try to
to?
get on an agenda as soon as possible.
Okay.
Well, I watched the Senate last night on TV for a pretty long time, really. And Senator Henry was very talkative on this issue of, this was the road tax issues and stuff. And it just seemed to me, if Senator Henry was on your side, you were doing really good. He
Yes.
was a good person to have.
Well, he may not be successful with
Yeah, I mean, we might not get him on our side on this issue.
No, I mean, he may not get his way.
Yeah, no, he may not. Yeah.
He
Okay.
has a lot of clout. He has a lot of clout, and he can
Well-
entice people, let's put it that way.
I haven't looked at the Senate side recently, but I know that the Senate road bill was high enough to where the state was gonna be able to increase transit. From
Not-
12
not some
million
of
a
it out,
year
yeah,
to
that's
30
not-
million a year
Yeah.
statewide. So that would represent a healthy increase in money coming from the state.
As of last night, some of it's gone.
Yeah, not surprised.
But, yeah, I'm not surprised either, and some of it should be gone.
Getting back to North Myrtle Beach, the thing is, we don't get there in time. Now they've started the Main Street, they're going to have a Market Commons put up there. Well, that's gonna cost a lot of money. And they have the dredging, which people are paying for, and they did get federal money for that. But they also have beach, you know.
Yeah, replacement, yeah.
And that is, they got money from that, from the federal government. So we've gotta get ourselves in there before she starts another project. That's what I'm saying, you know?
Well,
So we can be the next project.
I think you're being heard and listened to. And I don't think there are any other topics on PAC or service. So
Okay.
we can move on, Marlene?
Actually,
do it.
All
right.
Oh, wait, hold on, we had
Sneak
one.
previews for the intercommission,
What about them?
just to make them aware.
Yeah, we have one a day, the first, one's tomorrow, and then there's two in May, where we're
Tuesday
doing sneak
afternoon,
previews of the entertainment shuttle
Oh, okay.
and providing opportunities to buy advertising on it, showing them the routes, talking to the entertainment venues, hopefully about helping us with funding.
Actually, that's gonna be the 4D app,
What?
the 4D app.
It's like
Well,
being at
that's
the
for
dinner
advertising
table when the
and
two
stuff.
parents are
That's
having a
not funny.
conversation.
Okay. What was that?
I said it's like being at the dinner table when the two parents are having a conversation, the kids are sitting there. You want to bring us into whatever the hell it was you were talking about? Or
It
not?
was just, we have the, and I know that Mr. Silverman, and I think Mr. D'Angelo as well, was it 2 years ago that we did the
Yeah.
sneak preview?
Yes, yes.
And we're planning the same. We don't have any RSVPs for tomorrow, but we'll still be there. I think part of it is the fact that they have the trio dinner Monday night. Today's the day at the Steakhouse, so it was just, the times and dates that we've selected were based on the Hospitality Association directing us with what's going on currently within their system. So, it's tomorrow morning from 9 until noon, with the last bus pulling out at 11, to show them a sneak preview of our entertainment trolley for the summer. Then next Tuesday afternoon, May 2nd, from 1 until 5, the last bus pulls out at 4
Oh,
o'clock.
not May 1st?
No, ma'am, it's on
Oh,
Tuesday the 2nd.
Oh.
And then the following Tuesday, the 9th, which is the last Tuesday before Harley starts, that timeline will be 9 till noon, with the last bus pulling out at 11. Given that information, we've already sent a reminder out on Tuesday, which was yesterday, about tomorrow. We don't have RSVPs, but we'll still be there. We are also sharing with them the map pull-offs that we're doing again this year, and an opportunity for those who are non-resort, non-hotel, to buy into our app. It's a 4D app that you would scan the logo on the map, and it's the entertainment map, and items pop up, like the Sky Wheel pops up, or the Pelican Stadium, or Broadway at the beach, and any details there. So that's an advertising opportunity that we think that they would jump on.
Which one are you going on?
Well, I'm not sure, I'm not planning on any of them. I went on one, she was saying I went on one a year or two ago.
Yeah, I do too.
Board members are invited to participate in
Yes.
that.
Exactly, that's the reason I just wanted it brought up, was that you were aware of the times.
You send invites for those
I can do
meetings?
that.
everybody? If we could do that after this meeting is over, that would be great. Okay, sorry,
Yes.
stealing your thunder. Finance Committee.
There you go. So, pretty straightforward meeting. So, we talked about two main items, the March financials, and as you saw, some of the policies and procedures. Under the financials, primarily we looked at where we were at, and most of the items were in line. Again, vehicle maintenance, as you see, was a little bit out of line still, but not too far where any other revisions need to be talked about now. So we're still looking for that to come back in line. The last thing then was cash requirements. So on that cash page, we noticed there were a couple of low spots. So there was a 50,000 projected draw in May, and then a little bit of a big one in June for $200,000 just as the buses.
What page are you on? Sorry.
I was just giving you an overview.
Oh, you're just giving an
Yeah.
overview, okay.
It's on 8A.
Other than that, performance characteristics, we talked a little bit about ridership increases and grant drawdowns. But other than that, everything was pretty straightforward on financials. Any thoughts or questions on the financials?
Have you seen the resolution, the finance committee reviews check register and credit cards?
Absolutely.
I did not look
We
at
didn't get
last
that.
month.
Yeah, they were.
I put it in the back, just to let you know, at the timing of the finance committee, it was early in the month, and we
Yeah.
hadn't received the statements. They subsequently came in. I apologize, I probably should have shot them out a couple of days ago, but I did put them in the
Oh,
finance
paper.
committee there, the last few pages of your.
Well, I look at them at home, so
Okay,
this is.
and I did email them out to you guys as well. It was just kind of the timing, you
When did
know.
you send them out?
Yeah.
Pardon?
When
I
did
just
you-
did this morning.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
okay.
why,
You
okay.
didn't miss anything.
All right.
You're fine.
That answers my question.
Yeah, I had a blow on my part. I should have got those out Monday.
No, the timing's
Okay.
fine, it's just,
Yeah.
I want to make sure I didn't lose them in my,
Lori hasn't had a chance to update all the detail for April,
Good.
but most of it's in there, so you can.
because you spend a lot of time, I look at each
Yeah, I do
one
too.
of them, and I think that's the 200, anybody can look at them, but you and I
Yeah.
spend a lot of time looking at them, I
Okay.
think.
Kitty,
Yeah, oh, during the finance committee, did you discuss increasing fares?
No. Okay.
Oh,
I asked the finance committee at a future meeting, I'd like to see a comparison of 3 or 5 other
oh, that's right,
systems
yeah, all
to
right.
see what our fares are in relation to that. And I think a few years ago, you guys may have done that, but I'd like to see where we're at. We think we're lower than most, but I'd like to see some other systems. But I didn't ask, it could be next month or month after,
Within South Carolina, are you saying,
Or
or?
wherever.
Right,
wherever. Just what, I'll let Brian pick which ones, but
Okay.
I didn't ask for that for today or
Hard
even
to get
next
that
month.
information from a lot of people, isn't it?
some
Well,
of
I mean, you
it.
can use NTD, but the NTD is all 2 years old, you know, or
I don't think
FY
you-
Right, you
15,
just
but,
call
Yeah, I don't think you have trouble, we had
No.
trouble asking for salaries and
Yeah,
stuff like that, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
fair is
Yeah.
probably.
yeah, no, we can go on their website and get
Fares
some
in the
stuff.
passes, the structure and bundling of the passes could be an issue too, whether it's 3-day, 5-day.
Goes
Yeah,
back
no,
to
that's what I'd like to
discussion.
see.
The whole structure.
That's
yeah.
part of what I'd like to see, our structure relation to others, that
Yeah.
successful transit systems.
I think there was a commitment from the administration to try to get that information.
Yeah,
there.
and actually, I didn't ask for it soon, just in the next couple of months, I'd like, just for my education,
I'm
to be
working
able
on
to see that.
a project listing, so I'll make sure it gets on
There
there.
we go. There's your-
Well,
Well,
more have dates and some
Actually,
expectations.
I'll let you pick I'll let you pick the month.
That's what you told me.
I'd be quite happy with 2-year-old data, to tell you the truth, because I don't think that the economy has changed that badly.
Well, but our service has.
Oh, yeah.
That's the problem. So, you know, it's something that we need to do. I mean, we'd love to reduce cash handling and things like that, you know, all those things associated with the fare structure. But it's not on the priority list yet, that's all.
But you're not a management team that is big enough to include a researcher, but that is the kind of thing you would turn over
Yeah.
to a researcher and get quick information.
Nick's here.
Another thing,
No, Ron is-
another thing that would be interesting, and I know you had a lot on your plate, and I don't know how you find this out, but to find out what percentage other agencies are using fair media as far as opposed to cash.
Yeah, there's probably some national studies we could look at that. You know, it's almost every system's goal to reduce cash handling to its lowest possible because it costs money to handle the cash.
And it takes a lot of
And it's
time.
very difficult to eliminate it, but,
Well, if 10
and
people
then-
down a bus, each one has to find their.
and then there's some, substantial capital expenditure to put in the technology to do other types of,
Yeah, we have to have a kiosk at the main
Well, we had to
stations in
find out
order to
the
get.
low-hanging
well, and
fruit.
upgrading the fare boxes themselves,
Yeah,
which is, $10,000 to $15,000 a bus.
Yeah.
So if you look at page 11, Marvin, I don't know if you were gonna draw people's attention to this, but this is in the positive news category. Page 11, the progress that has been made on, down the bottom, passengers per hour. Fourth line from the bottom, so this is the demand response.
Ridership.
You notice that it's risen now to 0.91, 91 cents, I guess, or just
90.91 passengers per hour.
0.91, which is the highest that it has been, but also there's like a real positive trend as well. And you said that a lot of that is from increased efficiency associated with the routing system, is that right?
Well, yeah, I
You
mean,
might have
the
been
schedule,
warning you that in your-
we've sort of redone sort of the scheduling, but I would add to that, if you look at the cost per hour, the O&M expense per hour, which is the first line in the next set of, metrics above, you can see that's going in a positive direction too, and that's sort of been an ancillary benefit of the scheduling changes that Doug has implemented, where we're not spending as much on labor, because we're not having people sit around as much, and so I'm looking at that trend as well as being really good. It'll be interesting to see, last year we saw, just like the fixed route system, we saw an increase in ridership on the paratransit system during the season. And so it'll be interesting to see with additional trips in the system, whether or not we can actually meet our goal of 1 passenger per hour. But, so it's just a matter of trying to group trips wherever we can. That's not too inconvenient. for the
Anything
two
else on
riders.
finance?
Yeah,
Mark?
without having done,
No, you got it.
without having even gone through one calendar month of the transfer center, do you think your predictions on the labor cost of that are like in line?
I probably need a couple more months of stats for that. It has clearly helped us in responding to incidents. Huge. And I think that's really where we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. It's not taking us an hour to get another bus out to something, and we've been doing pretty well in terms of breakdowns, but everybody knows with and service interruptions, but everybody knows with increased activity coming in May and June and things like that. I think it'll really show some benefits there. I'm really interested in the ridership in how April compares to last April, because that will be the first month that we're looking at the same system. And so that, to be determined, we'll see how it's going, but it'll be interesting to see how, if we still gotten that 10 to 15% increase in ridership over that month. And we'll see. I think generally speaking, all of the changes we've made in terms of making the system easier to use have all contributed to maybe it's more of existing passengers are using it more often, but also getting some new passengers, so we'll see.
Marvin, anything else?
Yeah, so those again were some of the KPI metrics. The last discussion was just on the grant drawdown, which are pretty much in line with, Brian mentioned, about 100.
We're drawing down, we've drawn down everything on the state side, on the 5311, the rural side is a better way of putting it. So we're running into the June, July cash flow concerns, because we're not drawing down any outside money for May and June. Actually, most of April, May and June. So we're just keeping an eye on it. It's gonna happen every year. We're just gonna fight it until July 15th when our next slug of local funds come in. But we should be fine. There are a couple of instances where we're looking at using a short-term loan from CMB.
And we have 3 paydays, and we're just not for it.
Yeah, you got July, you got 3 paydays, so that, it's cash issue more than anything else, so.
Do you have to redo the budget in light of the governor signing the pension bill?
No, but I'm glad you mentioned, that's something that I have on my GM report, but, yeah, we're looking at a 2% increase in contribution by the employer, coming on July 1st. I don't think it has an impact on 17, but it will have an impact on 18, so, that's where
And
we're
the
starting.
percentage might go up,
Huh?
the percentage may even be higher.
Well, it goes up another 1% every year
1%
through
every year.
2022.
Put up 18.6 total, that didn't change in this bill,
Correct.
right?
Why does it not affect the 17 budget?
Well, it's just July, August, and September. I mean,
Oh,
we'll have increased costs,
Yeah.
but it's not, we got enough
I
in
keep
there.
forgetting we're on a different start time.
Right, so 18, we gotta start looking at. So we'll start laying 18 in now. We kinda have a good idea of what we're getting from each of our funders, so we'll get a head start on budgeting for FY 18.
1% bump's about 20 grand, just FYI, total cost for the year. A little over maybe.
So we're looking at a 2% bump, so 50 grand, 40 to 50 grand.
Yeah.
So does that crazy number on our balance sheet begin to fall once they start getting more money?
You would hope.
Well, it's predicated on earning 7.25% per year. So you have bet that
Real
budget.
good.
I'm like, where's that at? I want to get in on
How do we,
that.
how do we explain
Where's
employees?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was
Our
thinking.
employee contribution will be capped at 9, which is a little bit of an.
That's going up a little bit in
And
July
how
as
do we,
well.
how do we communicate that to them, that they don't think we're?
Well, we had the pension folks come out and chat with ours. Yeah,
Yeah.
you attended one of those, but we're ready for a state of the coast meeting, and we'll let them know
Okay.
what's happening.
But isn't there a little COLA that will after that? Is there a little July 1st raise that will offset that?
Well, that's in the budget, so
Yeah.
yeah, hopefully.
So it won't be such a hit.
Right.
I gotta get the
All right, so that was it for March finance. Any other questions for March financials?
Question from Mr. Wilson.
Oh, yeah, I have a couple of questions. On our current ratio, looking at last year,
What page, sir?
current ratio, that's page 7?
What sheet?
Page 7.
Page 7.
March of last year, we were up about 2.5% on our current ratio. This time we're almost down to 1. What caused that?
What is receivables doing?
Yeah, probably a cash
I'll let the
basis.
accountants answer that. I'll let the accountants answer that question.
It is primarily because receivables, if you compare 16 to 17, receivables are way down, which, basically that's a good thing.
So direct them to the balance sheet.
Okay,
So
balance
go to
sheet is on
page
page 6, and without getting too much down into the weeds, as Brian would say, as the current assets drop, which receivables is part of that, that quick ratio and the current ratio will drop as well. So that's, down 100 grand. And these aren't real large numbers. $100,000 is a significant swing for the current and quick ratio calculations.
So Ron, can you kind of say that we've just done a better job of pulling down our federal dollars basically, and that's why it's lower?
Yeah, that's good.
That's kind of what it boils down
And
to.
the other thing too is the offset to that, which is also in terms of the current ratio, without getting too technical, accounts payable is up, which is also pulling down the current ratio as well. So it's a combination of those two things that's causing that drop. So I mean, basically what that ratio does is tell you, do you have enough funds to cover your bills? So
Yeah,
our payables is creeping up, and most of this is simply timing. It ebbs and flows.
Yeah, that's what I'm at. Timing, it's timing.
Yeah.
Because of where you at with
When
the
it gets down
account.
below 1%.
Then you're in trouble. Then we go to the bank and borrow some funds.
Well, what is the quick ratio a measure of? What is that?
Liquidity.
Yeah.
And what's divided by what?
And again, I don't have all the components, so it's basically, it's your current assets over your current liabilities. Now, some of these are excluded, and I don't know, I have to look at the formula, but,
I can tell
you know exactly.
Yeah, so the current ratio includes all of your current assets or your current liabilities.
Typically.
And then your quick ratio takes out inventory.
Okay.
So when you subtract inventory, because,
Right.
especially for us, inventory is not an
It's
issue.
not that liquid.
Right,
Yeah,
so
okay,
really
take
your
out
quick
inventory on both
ratio.
ends and
That's right.
where-
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea is that can you pay your bills in a nutshell? That's what they're looking at. So you want your cash to be able to cover your payables, your cash and your receivables is the basic, idea behind it.
Mr. Wilson had another question?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had one other question on the salary, administrative versus
Yep.
the other employee. Which administrative show that it has about 37%.
Are you looking at the administrative ratio?
Yeah, administrative
Looking at a chart or that?
is about 37% of the salary.
Page one.
Would that be kind of high?
What are you looking at?
We're looking at
Page one?
the salaries on,
Was that one of the
yeah, that was
Page 2.
Page two?
on page 2.
Okay, I got it.
On page 2, looking at the administrative salary versus the salary and benefits for the other positions, which shows that the administrative is taking out about 37% of the money paid for salaries.
And I think that's basically what
Is
Brian's
that
been alluding
basically
to.
about, is that about the,
It's a little high because of the fact that we need a certain base of administrative people. I think Brian's been alluding over the last couple of years since I've been here anyways. We're sort of maxed out on the admin, but that includes marketing, it includes the HR, HR director. But the idea is we won't need to add more administrative bodies in order to increase service. So we're kind of at a floor in terms of maintaining all the grants and all the clerical stuff we have to do. But as we grow, presumably, we're not gonna have to add any administrative staff for the foreseeable future. So it's probably a little high in relation to a
yeah, I was
larger
wondering,
entity.
how we compare with others.
Yeah, that's a good
Well,
question.
It's I think Ron answered it perfectly. So yeah, we're a little high, but it'll go down as soon as we can figure out putting more service out on the street.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We could double service on the street probably and not add
it
any
wouldn't
admin.
affect anything, yeah.
And so we would drop, it would drop considerably if we were able to do that.
And we
It's a
have
matter of
no,
funding.
we have no separation of duty problem now?
Not the,
Yeah, nobody's
That I'm
cited
aware of.
anything, so.
we got through a couple, 6,000 audits here in the last.
Yeah.
If you look at page 10, we do the admin ratio for you, and again, that admin ratio drops in the summertime when we put a little extra service out. The last graph, bottom right, with the orange.
You're running the entertainment total.
Yeah, so we put 2 more buses out there every day, and the admin doesn't change, so, there's a lot of fluctuation in that number.
I guess Mr. Wilson's point though is just 37%. We're hearing that it's about the floor. Is that something to be added to the list that Daryl had asked for at some
I think
point?
so.
Just kind of a review of what is our standard, what do we compare to?
Yeah.
But what do we compare?
You could put that in the same to-do list. You wouldn't need a new project number for a project list here. That'd be-
I was gonna mention earlier, this goes back to our discussions when I first got here about identifying peers.
We have noticed that the GM's strategy for keeping board members quiet is to keep them frozen and their goosebumps are having goosebumps
Thank you.
on themselves, so we're back to normal.
Yes.
That's always my complaint.
Mr. Wilson came back alive once we warmed him up.
You give me too much credit.
Any other questions on finance? Marvin?
Well, I think that's it for financials and policy and procedures. We've already approved the one that we went through, so if there's any questions there, I think we're fine, Smith.
Okay. All right, moving on to manager's report.
It's like, we covered a lot of this, so let me kind of pick through here. Horry County has delivered drafts of 2 agreements leading up to their budget approvals. One is for this capital grant, $1 million for buses, and one will be our normal one. I haven't even looked at them yet, but I will let you all know of any issues that I see with them, but they've given us the opportunity to, ask for edits.
Well, especially let us know if there are any changes in the operating one.
Right. Or at least changes that I'll ask for. None come to mind, so I don't think we really have too many issues in that. That whole relationship's going pretty
This is
well.
early for them to deliver that to us. Usually that's the last minute.
Justin's on top of things, hopefully. So, on a somewhat related note, because Justin Powell will be involved in this, FEMA has denied our claim for evacuation for the hurricane on the basis that we were not legally responsible for providing evacuation, despite the fact that it's in our agreement. So they've recommended that we bill the county and let the county bill them.
After 6 months.
That is, and I'll tell you, and I'll say it on camera, and I'll tell the newspapers, this is the most asinine process I've ever been involved with. At least 40 people have looked at this claim. It flew through the state. And for them to spend this amount of money and time on reviewing what I would think is a pretty legitimate cost, it's ridiculous.
I might have to tell Lynn how to spell asinine, because I don't think she's used that in the minutes. the
Yes,
last couple of
well,
years.
I'll get her this.
It's like the insurance companies, you have to, even though they deny something, you send it back to them, they finally pay you.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to the patent.
Right.
US Patent Office, they deny it until they can't deny it anymore.
That's
So
right, that's right.
I'm gonna talk to Justin about incorporating it into their package, and I'm not confident that we'll ever see any money on that.
You might want to talk to my wife. In our house, she's the one who does all the bill haggling after we get bill one, and she gets them dropped down by 30 to 50%,
Yeah.
just by virtue of being meaner than a, well.
Well, and we submitted for 15,000 roughly,
Right.
and that's been whittled down to $11,800. I'm not sure how what the higher math is to get to that, but it was not a nice process and just reeks of government overspending.
I spent a couple days, and I think Henry, the lead guy at FEMA, spent 3 or 4 days. I had it all labor-based, and he converted it all to equipment-based because he thought that was a better likelihood of getting reimbursed. And then they, after I went through all these various layers of management, it finally got shot down in Columbia, so.
Well, it's unfortunate. It's something that builds a lot of distrust against government. I know in the 1,000-year flood, we had some flooding underneath our house, and FEMA kind of insisted they wanted to come and look at it. And dang, we must have gotten 14 letters since then saying that we weren't qualified for anything. I'm just thinking just of the mail and the effort to do that. They could have told us from
Even
the
with
get-go.
insurance companies, it's better just to pay for it yourself, which we did.
It leads to a cynicism.
Right.
Well, yeah, and what I don't want to get into is the county saying, well, we already paid for it. So I'll talk to Justin and I'll let you know how that goes.
That one may not be worth
We're gonna
bringing
get
in
$1
the
million,
bill.
so,
I'll ask him, and if he says no, I won't. So,
Ask if we can deduct it from $1 million.
right. So, Ron, on some other notes, Ron and I went through the FMO findings again, was that last week, or
Yeah,
my calendar's
yeah.
broken? And we feel like we're in pretty good shape. We're gonna send them a letter. There's all of the findings that required 90-day corrective action are due May 3rd, and we think we're in pretty good shape for all of those. So we're gonna put together a letter for Region 4, FTA, saying, here's what we've done. There's some procedural changes and things like that we've gotten documented.
Is it postmarked by May 3rd or received, or is it just kind of a funny date?
Have you corrected it by May 3rd? Even if I sent them a letter on May 15th, I can say these were in place on May 3rd, so it's not a huge deal. There's a couple in there, like the impairment loss on the international buses that we have 180 days on. I have moved on that. We've got legal folks working on strategy for that. But we will also send it to Triennial. Triennial's coming May 18th and 19th. Not really looking forward to it, but I feel like aside from a few things under ADA, we're going to be in pretty good shape. They are focusing on maintenance because there were findings on maintenance in the previous 2 triennials. I'm really comfortable about that side of the house. We've updated our maintenance plan to include all the new procedures that we've developed as a result of, this exercise we've been going through over the last few months.
Do board members have any role in it, triennial?
I think they will be interviewing at least the chair, but I'll find out about that.
Yeah, because we want to get on our schedule.
Well, we need to get on your calendar, exactly. So I will look in to see who they want to talk to. There are a bunch of questions in there about management of the 5310 program and things that we don't do here. So I'll have to get the MPO here to help speak to those. And I had to attend their review from Federal Highway. So, that's kind of a reciprocating kind of
So
thing.
if you or Lynn could get it on our calendars.
Yes, yeah.
3 years ago, when I was chair during the triennial, and I think the only part I played was being here for the presentation. They wanted to present it to the
So
board.
they weren't interviewing you.
No, I never got interviewed, but when they gave their findings or their
Right.
summary, they wanted, I was there, maybe other board members too, I don't remember exactly.
So we have, this is kind of what we're diving into. After we get our financial reports into FTA for the 5307 grant this afternoon, we're going to be diving into some more responses on the triennial. They've asked for some more information on a few things. There's a bunch of questions in there about FMO stuff, which kind of bugs me because I'd hate to have to go through any of the FMO stuff again. And they ought to have some trust that FMO covered those things adequately. So there may be a little bit of barking that needs to be done as it relates to that. And then we've completed the FY16 NTD report. We're still not reporting passenger miles, which is if 10 people ride 10 miles, that's 100 passenger miles. And that is a statistic frequently used by FTA, and it actually is incorporated into the funding formula for a very small portion of funding. So if we were able to report passenger miles, we might see a little bump in funding 2 years from now.
Route 16 and 7 would be favorable to us reporting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would, if I had to venture a guess, I'm not really basing this on any math, but I would say that we probably have a 7 or 8 mile average passenger trip length.
Can you compute that without fixed stops in place?
No, and that's the problem. And so, kind of going back and forth with the NTD data guy who's, is like, oh, you gotta report passenger miles. Like, I don't really have a way to do it. He came up with this idea of, well, how many buses do you all operate? And if you operate less than 30 buses total in peak service, you don't even have to be a full reporter. And so the number of forms that we have to fill out goes from 25 to 9. And so I signed up for that like wholeheartedly. So we are now a limited reporter, which is the way it ought to be until we get to a system that exceeds that threshold. And it means we don't have to do any more monthly reporting. We just do the annual report every year, and that's just very appealing to me.
You still need Ron?
So yeah, we can cut Ron down to part-time.
All right. Just phone it in.
So, and the last thing is we've gotten the, there's two things here. We've gotten a new draft agreement with the MPO. That's something that's been done kind of on a 3-year basis, I think. But this year will be different because we have to incorporate Brunswick Transit into that agreement. So coming up with now having a sub-recipient coming up here soon just sort of adds a little bit to our plate. So this thing with the NTD didn't come soon enough, or just came just soon enough. And then there was one other thing. We've gotten a contract from the state for the buses. So we've signed it, we've sent it back to them. So now I have $1.7 million in place to buy those buses. So all's good on that end. So the money will flow. And we have 30 days after acceptance of a bus before we have to pay for it. So the cash flow issues, shouldn't be any as it relates to fairly large outlays of cash for those things.
The
So
first bus gets here before the 4th of July, right?
that's the schedule right now, and as I understand it, they are on schedule, so we'll get 2 that week after, and then a 4th one the week after that, so they should all be in.
Let us know when it appears, because we're gonna be here with the camera, we wanna see the
Oh.
colors.
That's good
There
news.
you go.
The Texas buses might still be hanging in there then.
Yeah, no, they're in pretty good shape. We will lose all the Richmond buses as a result of this purchase, so
Yeah, that's good.
it's
We've had them too long.
sort of a rite of passage. I know a tear came to Doug's eye that we're losing all the
The blue
Richmond
ones,
buses.
right? The
Those
blue
are the-
ones?
The white, no, the white ones with the,
So they got a big
What's the
blue
one with the
thing
blue
there.
on the back? Isn't that
That's
it?
it.
That's it,
Richmond.
right. Because I see that on 79th when I'm there.
Yeah, I see them, I ride on them now and then.
They must come up the boulevard.
well, they get
Not the boulevard,
distributed
the
throughout the
17,
system, so you can see them
17,
anywhere.
Right.
Is anybody going to the GSAC policy meetings? Are you going, or Joe?
Kevin covers those.
Okay.
And we've been involved in the long-range plan, glad you mentioned that. The long-range plan, which is a 30-year document for all federal spending in the region, that MPO,
Highway spending.
well, both, highway and transit. All transportation, non-motorized transportation as well, so bike paths, sidewalks, all that stuff goes in there. And we've been involved in those discussions, we're on the steering committee, and in fact, I gotta return a call to the consultant. They're gonna do some off-model analysis. In the development of a long-range plan, you prepare a highway model. So it models traffic flow throughout the region. So what you do is you build a model that replicates what's going on out there now. So it shows congestion on 501 and some of these places. And then you overlay population change over the 30 years. And you also add improvements that are actually committed, like 3 lanes in each direction out here and those types of things, to see where the congestion, how it changes. That's the whole premise of doing it. And then you develop your plan based on trying to solve those congestion issues. Well, one of the project, the long-range project for 501 includes provisions for transit. Now, it's not really defined, but in theory, it could be a lane.
Separate lane would
A
be.
separate lane type of thing, and maybe even like a contraflow lane where it's going in one direction during the morning peak and another direction the other peak. But I said, look, long range, not necessarily for this development of the long range, I would like to see an analysis of what high capacity transit does on 501. And the way you do that is, because there's no transit links in the model, is you do an off-model analysis. There's a spreadsheet tool that you can use where you're looking at person trips that use that particular corridor, and based on whatever travel times you put into it and a number of other stats about the transit, the high capacity transit, it will tell you how many trips would go on that. And the reason for that is I would like that for future cannon fodder, if you will, on what a major transit investment would do for that particular corridor. And then we can equate the performance of transit on that corridor to other corridors in the region. And
I
they've
love the aspirations of young people who
Well, and
are gonna live long enough to see this.
This has been my life for the last 20 years, doing stuff this around the country, in different areas. So unfortunately for CDM Smith, the consultant, they're dealing with someone who really knows how to do this, so they're gonna have to do it right, but they've agreed to do it, is the point I want to make. So we're gonna get some really good information on what, what that high capacity transit could do in the corridor. When you think about, those links, basically from downtown Conway to downtown Myrtle Beach, you still need distribution and collection on either end in order to really make it work. Whether it's a park and ride at one end, but you need a lot of routes and stuff to get them to their final destination, because they don't all work at the Amtrak station or some point downtown. And so it'll be interesting to kind of develop that and work out some of the details on travel time. But that analysis would be the same as doing you can look at what a bus would do on a bus lane, or what we did to develop the rail corridor. And honestly, the analysis doesn't really distinguish between the two. It's all about a travel time type of thing. So, so whatever results we get would be,
That's right.
would equate to either type of service, whether it be rail service or bus service. And so that's just really good information to have in terms of you know, future discussions. And the intent is, next update, maybe we do put in a transit investment in the long-range plan. So it's there's your planning,
Brian, we're glad you're happy.
planning 401.
Happy.
I only
It's like
got
a
one
$400
question
course
on
in
this.
planning.
How are you gonna get over the intercoastal? On the cantilever bridge?
Are you gonna do a bridge?
New bridge?
That bridge is there, someone stole the copper. That's why it doesn't work.
Anything
Oh,
else
really?
here, man?
I didn't know that.
That's all I had, sir.
Someone stole the copper.
I'm just gonna tack on to Brian's manager's report, a reminder that come May, we have nominations for vice chair. I will not be here at the May board meeting. I will have left for China the week before, but I will be here for the committee meetings. And I'll just be gone for that month. And the second reminder is that we need to do our GM evaluation process. I understand you guys have met and drafted some things.
Yeah, we
So
have a,
that is a May activity that we need to get going to.
So-
What's the nomination?
We do that now?
No, we do it in May.
Yes, I'm sorry, that's what I thought it was.
but we do have a form for
No,
you.
but I had two things. One was the call for nomination, but the other was the evaluation of GM, and you started.
Yeah, well, we met on the evaluation, and we looked over the evaluation, one change I think was on there.
Yeah, and so I think it's been updated.
Okay.
So I can distribute these, and I've also done an assessment of where we are on goals.
Okay, on your goals, you
So I'm gonna
got your
give this
goals.
to
then.
everybody.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, we need your goals, and then we need the evaluation.
So it is part of your GM report.
So,
So do we mail
Is
these
this
back to
this the
Mr.
one that's
Wilson?
being
Yeah,
filled back?
you need to, I guess, Mr. Wilson, you need to let them know when you want these.
yeah, we need, you need to take these and look over and do them, and we need to have these back.
Oh, wait a minute, I got two.
Well, we need to have them back before the end of May, because we need to do this evaluation.
Is the committee meeting good, or you want me to mail them to you?
We could mail them to you.
You can mail them to me, or you can bring them back to the company and I can pick them up.
Give me your address.
Huh?
It's on the, it's on his, the address.
Oh, I got that.
My address,
I
Your
got it.
address is on the,
yeah,
Roster.
it's Myrtle Avenue, right?
okay.
Did I get one? Oh, this
Yeah, you
one?
need to mail these back to me, and so we can, I can look over and have them ready to go back to Brian before the end of the month.
Brian, can your staff mail them directly to Mickey and to Joe?
Yeah, we'll get it over to you.
Oh, you changed this for me.
I
I
don't know.
love that. I love
I
that.
don't know how Mickey gonna evaluate
Finally,
you,
after how many
Yeah,
years?
no, don't say it.
as long as it's denied.
Let the record show that Kitty is smiling. And she used the word love in a kindly way.
And we want to bring one more thing to your attention. We also put in a note there, just if you select don't know, that question effectively gets thrown out of the calculation for your personal evaluation.
That's great.
All right, good.
All right.
Okay, that's great.
Brian, I'm not sure, I mean, the situation that I told you about this week, we're kind of trying to bring that up, I don't know, but is this pertinent or should we wait till?
You want to go into executive session for the personnel?
Oh, no, it's
It's
nothing,
nothing really huge, but it's just a small.
no, we just
issue.
had a request from Alan Clemens, you know, about adjusting a bus stop at his business location.
Right, yes, well, what had happened was, though, he called me Friday night and he said Friday afternoon, it's been continuing, apparently it's a new bus stop.
I'm not even sure
Yeah,
where,
the last
where it
couple
is.
of
Is it the one on Oak Street? It's not in,
I'm not in.
it's across from Santee Cooper. Santee Cooper is one location going one way, and he just happens to fall
Okay.
across, so it's not new.
Okay, well, he contacted me and said he knows for the past 2 or 3 months that, excuse me, I got orthodox in here. Past 2 or 3 months that, apparently the people that are waiting to ride the bus are stopping on his porch and kind of, you know, filling up his porch waiting for the buses. So what's happening is his clients are trying to get in the door and they're just a gobble of people. So Alan went out Friday and asked them to please, you know, just nicely to please just.
Go out in the rain.
use- Right. And they, apparently a couple of the riders got up in his face and it got pretty ugly.
Ooh.
And so he was kind of upset. He called me Friday night and then texted me right behind that, so. and wanted me to see what could be done about.
I don't think.
Yeah, I haven't even talked to Doug about it yet.
Charging $1.
We will address the issue
I just wanted to bring it
and
to
do what we can.
We need a bus shelter like in that area or
We
just
can approach the city about putting a shelter
nearby,
by.
so people will.
In
Well,
Latin,
you
it
should have
would
some
Heidi
pull,
out
you
into
should
the
be able to put one in there.
Yeah.
We'll look into it.
Okay.
We do have a card for Joe. Has everybody signed it? I'm gonna take this down.
We have no resolutions to approve?
No.
Do we have any reason to go into executive session?
I don't think so.
You mentioned the committee meeting wanting to update.
You know what? We probably should
What is that?
go into executive session,
Okay,
but it's
For a-
for a
what
legal
type
matter.
for a legal matter?
I have one thing for you.
Yes, sir.
I could not, open up that information you sent out. I don't know what program you sent it out on.
You
Yeah.
gotta get an app, you gotta download an app, which is, what is the?
Windmail. It costs like
Windmail app.
$2.99.
No, you can get one free, I
Oh,
have a free.
I didn't get one free.
I have a
What did
free
you
one.
send out?
Are you trying to pull these up on a iPad?
On
Or in a
on the computer.
Yeah, I had trouble too until I got
Yeah, I
that.
couldn't open it.
It's
Are
a-
these PDFs that we're having trouble with?
Yeah, but they're in a thing called Windmail.
That's what
It
you
comes to
send
me
your,
in
your
Windmail.
attachments with all the time.
Yeah.
And what we have is you can go into your apps, and there's a free
Windmail,
Windmail.
W-I-N-M-A-I-L.
Windmail,
Windmill.
and just
Oh.
download it.
Can't you just send it out a different way in the future?
Yeah.
Well, PDF's pretty common in that.
Yeah,
No,
but your
it's-
PDFs come to me in Windmail.
it
I don't
doesn't
know
come
why.
to PDS, it comes with Windmail.
That's probably an email issue, not
I think it's
a
an
file
Well, it
issue.
comes-
I will look
It
into
may
it.
be Outlook. You use Outlook?
I do.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah, it might
don't
be
use
an Outlook.
I don't use
Yeah.
Outlook.
And
So we're
then Outlook.
corrupting our, something's getting corrupted with the.
No, but if you go, if you get this Windmail app,
It's been coming
app,
to us for 2 years
I
like
just
that.
click it and it all opens up.
Yes,
Yeah,
and I finally got smart and went
Yeah, me
in
too.
because,
I didn't get that smart because I paid for it.
but you paid for it, but there's a
You got-
free one.
You know this, I mean, you're having this issue, Sid?
So what
I'm not
time
on my
you got it
iPad.
on your phone?
Might be-
No, I don't have my phone, did you, wait a minute, let me see.
No, I don't
Let me
use
I
go
can
Outlook.
in.
see the, I can see the issue happening
Wait a
with an
minute.
iPad.
Wait a
If you're
minute.
using, you're
No.
using a PC, you're using
iPad's
a,
gonna do fine.
Wait a minute.
I get it on, I get my emails on PC
Like you said.
and also on my
yeah,
laptop.
it's
All
probably a
right.
setting on my email I have to fix.
Right, wait a minute, wait a minute,
HTML or,
Yeah, I don't know, I couldn't.
wait a minute, we'll find it.
and is that the first time this happened or for you, or has
No.
it been happening a lot for you?
Well, not a lot, but a few times it has.
Windmill dot.
It used to happen to me every time, and then I would have to ask
Oh,
someone
this
to
one.
open it up and send me the PDF separately. But now, with this app, just click it and then everything opens
Instead
up.
of just a PDF reader, that doesn't work for you guys?
No,
No.
because other people send me PDFs, but this one from Brian comes wrapped up in
It's
somehow
always
in
there.
Windmail.
Can you
Well-
look and see if you can open what I just
Here,
sent?
here's the one
Because I
right
just
here,
sent
it's
some
I can
free,
open
see
what
that?
you said.
Yeah.
See that right there?
Well, I can open it on my
That's
phone.
free.
It's my desktop.
Well,
I'll let you know if I can.
We'll look
You
into
go
it.
into
I'll let you know.
Windmail and get that free,
Is that like
and then
us
when you,
sitting
when you
somewhere?
try to open it
All right,
up,
I'll let you know if I can open one
it goes into either
with or
way,
without using
Facebook,
Windmail.
email, whatever,
It'll be
open.
it'll be in there.
Yeah.
And you just hit it, and then it comes up and it stores in there, all right? It's been that way for a long time,
Yeah, for me too.
until we had a big discussion about it, and then, but this one is free.
Well,
It
I
has,
could
it
store
has,
I'll look into it.
Yeah.
this
maybe
one
you
right
can
here,
send
this
a
one is
different
free, see that?
Yeah, I know, free.
Oh, you already paid for it.
I paid $2.99, you know.
Oh, that's all
So,
right,
if
it
we
was
get-
worth it.
If we get a motion to go into
We get a motion
executive
to go,
session.
I move to go all in favor.
Second.
It looks
All in
like an
favor?
animal.
Aye.
All right, we are going into executive session for
Give me just a
a legal
second, I'm
matter.
gonna get.
Yes, please.
I think
Put
you
it
said
back.
that.
Right, we are back in session. Now can I have a motion to come out of executive
I
session?
move we come out of executive session.
Second,
Darrell has moved. Kitty has seconded, and Brian is making notes, suddenly realizing, oh crap, I should have been recording this all on.
For
do
the
we
other
have,
motions.
All right,
Who moved
we're
to
back,
go
and there
into?
was no action taken.
who moved to go in, you did,
I think I did, yeah.
and you seconded, I think, didn't you?
I Moved and seconded.
Do we have the second and the first on the consent agenda? Or is that what you were
Yeah, I have
saying?
that.
Okay. All right, we are back. There was no action taken. We have full business.
I just have a quick question, well, actually, not all business.
Where you're on.
Well, it's just a question on, we were looking at the credit card statements, just one quick question, Clemson University? do you-
As for the conference,
Okay, got it.
Is it number that one? Should be this
Yes,
one?
it is on the, he came in and did.
Okay.
Any old business, any new business?
Nope.
Any requests to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
11:15.
Can I second it?
All in favor?
Good?
Aye.
We're good.
Okay, I'm gonna.
See you all at committee meetings, or you want to also get together the bylaw people?